But then I get this call, and it was this. This is the old days, when people leave a message on the phone. Yeah, that little recording, and she goes, John, this is Julie Moore, and I was on one of your rooftop gardens on Fifth Avenue. This is one I did on Lower Fifth. She said, I would love to have you come over and see my garden. I said, sure. Well, I didn't connect Julie Moore. I just, I showed up.
Was she already famous at this point?
Oh,
or
yeah.
was it probably Boogie Nights?
Yeah.
It was her. Yeah. Okay.
You're listening to A Life Creative, real conversations with artists, designers, and other creatives about how they build, sustain, and evolve their careers. Hello. If you're a first-time listener to A Life Creative, welcome. I'm Melania Gomez, an interior stylist and the host of this show. My friend Marcy McGoldrick and I started this show in March 2025 with the desire to reconnect with our former colleagues and creators that we admire. We found that in our day-to-day lives, we often don't know the backstories of some of our dearest friends, and we wanted to open this deeper dialogue and understand better the foundations of creators' inspirations and share their stories with a wider audience. Jon Carloftis, a garden designer and author from Kentucky, is my guest on today's show. Jon and I go way back. We met in the 90s in New York City through mutual friends. Back then, he was building his rooftop garden business and eventually moved to Bucks County, Pennsylvania. I had the opportunity to showcase Jon's amazing gardens and home in the pages of Martha Stewart Living years ago. These days, Jon is living in Lexington, Kentucky, and I'm eager to connect with him again and have him tell his story about his upbringing in rural Kentucky that led him to do rooftop gardens in New York City and finding his path back to his native Kentucky as a garden designer, author, and public speaker. Hello, Jon. It's so great to have you on the show. You are our first garden designer guest. Can you share a little bit about your idyllic childhood? Tell us more about that.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on, Mel, and I'm excited about this. We've known each other a long time.
A long time.
Long time. So we got separated. So my parents were kind of hippies before there was such things as hippies.
Your mom was a hippie.
Well, in the 50s, the early 50s, they sold everything. They had my grandmother's businesses. They had the beautiful house built by the senator, all the things. And then they bought this 50 acres surrounded by the Daniel Boone National Forest. So our closest neighbor they just went off the grid, is what I'm saying.
Okay. Because when I met your mom is probably one of the most elegant women that I have ever met, and to the point of intimidation. The way she talks and the way she sort of sits properly, and no back on the back of this. Your back doesn't touch the back of your seat when sort of.
But they bought this 50 acres surrounded by the Daniel Boone National Forest. Our closest neighbor was 4 miles one way, 2 miles the other, and still is to this day because no one can get any closer. In the beginning, there was no electricity on this property. So they had to use a Model T engine
for power.
For power. Our water source was 2 miles up from a fresh spring on our property. And even that we had that water source until we finally got city water in the mid 90s.
So you were living the Daniel Boone life right now.
Now,
Okay.
All while she drove a Cadillac. They moved in with a Cadillac. You see what I'm saying? So she was this proper woman.
I mean, we're in the country, but we're not that country.
Yeah, it just was a great place to grow up. We didn't have TV. They just weren't interested, and we were probably too far out to get it. Yeah. And we just we played. So I'm the youngest of 6. My oldest sister is 16 years older than me. We had a little farmette, you know what I mean? We had like 1 or 2 of everything just for
So it sounds like it was about sort of entertaining yourself.
Yeah.
And sort of, so is that where the most of the influence of your aesthetic came from?
Yes. Yeah. Because, I mean, we're in the woods and we're right on the river. And so Daddy would teach me all these trees because we would have to go every Sunday, we would have to go along the pipe from our spring to bleed air out of the pipes so we'd get pressure to come down. I know, but he would teach me, he'd say, this is a sycamore tree. Look how it grows on the river, and look how the bark, flakes off. And so he taught me all this stuff growing up.
And who taught him? Did he just was one of those people that knew everything about everything?
He was, he could do anything. He could do anything. He was he loved to cook. He loved gardening.
So you were at this location or this home throughout grade school, throughout high school, mm-hmm. and then you decided to go to university.
Yes.
Right. And what did you study there?
Well, I got a major that didn't interfere with my social life, I joined I'm telling you the truth. This is the truth. So so all my brothers and sisters went to University of Cumberland, which is a small college that's still, down there. And I was the one that went to the big university, and I decided like 2 days before college started to go. I just, I was on a waiting list for a dorm. So I went through this thing called fraternity rush that I didn't know what a fraternity was. But I joined this, you had to be a farmer to be in it, agriculture, called Alpha Gamma Rho, AGR. And it's been around for, hundreds of years or over 100 years.
I love the name Alpha Gamma Rho.
Alpha Gamma Rho.
Right, Field Row.
Alpha Gamma Ho, that's what they call it. But it's so I went through Rush, and then they let me just move into the fraternity house, which is very unusual because you have to wait a year and all that. But I became social chairman within a year, and was planning all the parties. Did that for a couple of years, but I loved it. And but I got this major. It was really it's business communications, and it just it was. So I have a photographic memory. So things have been easy for I could go to class and listen. And then I can take a test and I can do it.
I don't think I knew that about you, that you have a photographic memory.
Well, wow. I try to put a lot of things under the hat.
You're trying to forget a lot of things too.
I always play like, what? Who? What? And but so it was really easy. And then after the best 12 years I ever spent, I'm just kidding. No, I'm just
a 12-year fraternity program.
Yeah, no, but after 4 years, I graduated, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm going to have to get a job." You know what I mean? I hadn't thought about that part. I was just having a blast. Yeah. And then I decided, instead of trying to get a job, I doubt anyone would have hired me, but I went back to college, and I just took all the classes I want to take: trees and shrubs, annuals and perennials, art of Greece and Rome. I just took a full year of them. Just had the best time. I loved it. And then I met Willis, and he became a model in New York, and he said, "Come up." And
did he got scouted in Kentucky? Like they found him and then he moved.
He did something in Los Angeles, and I went out there and stayed a month with him, and then he got scouted, and then he was taken to New York, and then I moved up thinking I would stay the summer. Mm-hmm. I had a summer after that 1 year of classes. I just ended up staying there for 20 I worked there 26 years.
Wait, you guys lived in Chelsea, right?
303 West 18th Street, 10011.
Yeah, right in the middle, the heart of the Champs-Élysées, right there, right? So you're in New York. Do you have a job?
Nope, I didn't have a job.
So what were you doing? You just sort of...
Well, I just thought, well, I've got to work. And I made these cards up that said, Jon Carloftis, rooftop garden designer.
And had you ever done a garden before?
I never been on a rooftop. I gardened my whole life. So, I kind of knew that. I had that part down.
And where did this idea come from? Just the rooftop? Because you figured, all right, there's all these tall buildings. There's only other place to have a garden. Yeah. Okay.
And I just, I just came up with this idea. So I went around the Upper East Side and I gave them to doormen and elevator men. And I said, give it to the person on top.
Brilliant.
Somebody called me, believe it or not. And they, it was Barbara and Eugene Schwartz, 1160 Park Avenue. She had me up there, and I'll never forget coming up the elevator, service elevator. And I didn't even know what to expect. I thought the guard...
Did she want to see a portfolio, or she was just like, just okay, let's do it?
I'm sure she wanted to see that I didn't have anything, I didn't have anything.
Yeah, you had a description.
Yeah, I had an idea. I had a dream. Yeah, but she, I'll never forget. She brought me up, and I kind of thought they were on. You lived up there, and then there was another roof on top. But hers was the apartment, and then there was terraces all the way around. So everywhere you looked out of the room. And I'll never forget, I learned a lot, because she said, I look outside this and see this view 365 days a year. We can't, this is not Kentucky. She said, we can't pull our containers in, store them in a basement, or store them in your garage. It's things that must be able to live all year long, no matter what temperatures. And I look at it, and she was like, she had this very contemporary, famous art collection. She had Warhol, she had a lot of Cindy Sherman, unbelievable things. And she gave me one little box. There was some boxes up there,
like garden boxes
made out of wood, and they had junipers and taxus and nothing else. And she gave me one little thing to do. Within a month, I was doing the whole thing.
So she started that one box, you brought it back, and she said, "Oh, I loved it," and then it just grew from there.
Yeah.
Well, that's a turning point in a career.
And it just, but I brought in ideas that she was not used to, and that were just common to me. I wasn't like I was trying to do anything. It was just like I said, well, why don't you grow tomatoes up here? Why don't you grow? It's the full sun. You could grow kind of most anything up there. And I would bring up tobacco sticks, and I would. Make tripods out of them and grow her tomatoes, and it looked really rustic. It was just my aesthetic that I grew up with happened to work in well with what she loved.
Sort of complemented what she was looking for. And and I'm looking at this list of your clients, and you have some incredible stories, but you got a lot of your clients through referral.
That's all it was.
It's just all it was. So
I never
who else
advertised.
Your favorites? Tell us about your favorites.
So through her, a couple years later, I ended up getting a friend of hers at 1220 Park Avenue, Frederica Kemp Biggs. And she had the top 3 floors, 9 terraces. Each terrace was color coded off of the color of her room. I had to do the flowers off of that room. And I learned, and so it went from there to I did Jane Lauder, Estee Lauder's granddaughter, she's now, I guess, the head of Clinique, for many years. Loved her, just was crazy about her. Did a beautiful garden on Park Avenue for her. And then a lot of art people, word of mouth. But then I get this call, and it was this, This is the old days, when people leave a message on the phone. You have that little recording. And she goes, John, this is Julie Moore, and I was on one of your rooftop gardens on Fifth Avenue. This is one I did on Lower Fifth. She said, I would love to have you come over and see my garden. I said, sure. Well, I didn't connect Julie Moore. I just, I showed up.
Was she already famous at this point? Or was it probably Boogie Nights?
Yeah.
It was her. Yeah. Okay.
She was famous at that point. I knew her, and she was, well, even my dogs. So my whole life, all of my girlfriends, all my best girlfriends to this day, they're all reddish hair. I don't know. Even my dogs are yellow with a reddish tinge. I mean, everybody knows I'm a redhead guy. Okay.
Yeah. Yes. I know. You love a ginger.
And consistent. But, well, it was one of those places where you go into the lobby and then you go up, and when the elevator door opens, you're right in her living room.
In the apartment, yeah.
And I was just coming up, and then the door opened, and I was like, "You're Juliet Moore." I almost fell over, And she goes, "Yes, I am." And I ended up helping her with 3 gardens. She was wonderful. So a lot of people, I would work in these buildings, and I would take the service elevator because I have to, because you have to bring the plants up and the plants down. Mm-hmm. So you meet interesting people on the service elevator. There's the people that are all working there. And then I figured out a lot of these famous people get on there and they go out the back. You know what I'm saying? To avoid people. So
that's where you find them.
Oh, and I'm just talking, everybody's the same to me.
You are an equal opportunity. You are probably the most gracious person that I know, that, like your mom, that you talk to every single person. So everyone has a story to tell kind of idea. And so in these elevators, you would actually meet clients.
Yeah. And I just, somebody would say, I would see there, and, I was raised, if you have eye contact with people, you say hello. That's just part of it. And then they'd say, well, what is that? I said, oh, well, this is, some sort of plant, some sort of flower, I'd say, this is a certain shrub, and she would say, real interesting. And they'd say, well, come see my place, and they would have a penthouse or a little terrace on their place. So that's how I met. And then, like Edward Norton. So that was interesting. I got a call. He had bought Richard Gere's penthouse. Edward became famous from that one movie, Primal Fear, where he played a person from Kentucky. So I remember that.
Laura Linney and with Laura Linney, I think, yeah.
And it's a great, amazing movie. And he's just the best actor. Edward loved he loved native plants and so I created this beautiful kind of very natural. I had the boxes built. I had my carpenter in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, who would build these containers for me, because back then you couldn't get large fiberglass containers. They just weren't available.
Well, that's the other question I had, is how are you doing these big sort of rooftop gardens? Where was your workspace? Is that why you found Bucks County?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I could do it. I always say, my office is my Toyota Tundra to this day. Essentially, because I'm in there work. I brought everything from a Toyota Tundra, but right now I'm in my kitchen. This is my office. I bought this property. I used to have a real proper office on the 3rd floor of the carriage house, and then really, I don't need all that. I just rather, because I'm a multitasker. I'm looking at the most beautiful garden you've ever seen right now. It's in my walled garden. I cook in here. I have my dogs. I've got them over right now. They're not here because they're loud and they're always trying to get they would be upset I was talking to somebody.
So the viewers know, John always has 2 dogs. For as long as I've known him,
mm-hmm.
You always have 2 labs.
Female, yellow with a reddish tinge.
It's hard enough doing anything in the city. I can't imagine full planters, plants, trees, shrubs, and floral. So is when you were in Bucks County, basically that was your sort of nursery and then you had to drive to the city every day.
Yes. And then, like to do a big installation, I would have a U-Haul that we'd come in, and then we'd double park, and we'd carry everything up. I would measure everything, and then I'd have my carpenter out there build it, and we would see it. We'd put it together, then take it apart, then put it in a U-Haul, and he would go with me one day because he didn't want to go in the city. I forced him. He was not. He had no interest. He didn't have to. Didn't need to. And I would take him, and I couldn't leave. Like I couldn't even leave to go get lunch. I had to be with him. It's true.
And so he'd rebuild it.
He would rebuild it, and then I'd have my crew that would help me. Always just one or two people, and we would build the garden. We'd get that built, and then we'd come back the next day to continue to start building the garden.
If you're enjoying the show, one of the best ways to support it is by following, rating, and leaving a quick review. It only takes a second, but it really helps people to find the podcast. If you have questions, ideas, or suggestions for future guests, we would love to hear from you. You can reach us through our website, alifecreativepod.com, or find us on social. And thanks as always for listening.
I moved to New York in '88. We bought that house, Willis and I did, on December 12th, 1990. And it was this little house, 1850s farmhouse, that was the house that nobody wanted. You know what I mean? Well, I remember for 2 weeks, it didn't even have a front door on it, but there was nothing to steal, because we changed the old door out, but it was just open.
You're the type of person that cares more about the plants outside than the stuff inside. Yeah. So I remember you saying that when you first moved there. You said, I need to get the garden done first before anything in the inside. And I think that's how most garden designers are.
Yeah, my first book, it was my brother named it. It was called First a Garden, because that's what I did before we got into that house, But
so,
go ahead.
Yeah. No. So that's the other thing, you just brought up is your first book. And where did that start? You have this career, you're in the city, you're doing these gardens. You're in Bucks County and you're having this whole business. And on top of that, you decide, I want to do a book. And where did that start?
Well, I've been thinking about it. And then I was an idea guy for a lot of magazines, like Garden Design and, and Martha Stewart.
Sort of a contributing editor at the time. Yeah. So, how did you get into that world?
My mentor, my best friend, she's family, so she is to me, is Christopher Hersheimer.
Who was your neighbor?
She became my neighbor when I had her move down there next to me. She lived in Doylestown, but she co-founded Savoir magazine with Dorothy Kalins. But I met her when she was with Metropolitan Home. She was the food editor of Metropolitan Home magazine. And Metropolitan Home came out. This is great. Yeah, you're reminding me of exactly how it started. They came out to photograph the home of a designer named Bill Robinson. And I had met him through Willis, because Willis was one of his models.
I see.
And I met him, and I built this garden by my hands. I got a book. We had to have a retaining wall. And I got a book, and I learned how to build a stone wall. And I built that retaining wall. When Metropolitan Home came out, they were photographing his home. And I was in the garden, and I met Christopher. Well, they ended up putting, as the cover of the magazine, it was the home with my garden. Really, it was the garden with the home in the background. And that's what started it. And so
that sort of started this editorial slant on your career. After that, you became a contributing editor for
Garden Design magazine. When she left Metropolitan Home and they started Savoir, it was also Garden Design. Those were sister publications. And so she made me contributing editor. So I would come up, I would help with styling, plants. So when they do a photo shoot, I would bring in these things like, I'll never forget bringing in Sansevieria, or they call snake plant, or mother-in-law tongues, which were very popular in the 70s. And so this is in the 90s, so they were not popular. They were kind of very old-fashioned.
So you sort of reintroduced it?
Yeah, because it was new to me. Because I remember the design editor. She was like, "Oh my God, I hate those." And I said, "Well, but that's the way I am. I don't have just. I've never, and I got that from Mama, but I don't have these like that's old fashioned or new. I just look at it, and if I like it, it's beautiful, and it can also transcend any. It's nature. How could it be bad?
Yeah. Well, that's a really good point about where was I? I was in the flower market in New York, and certain plants are coming back, like a spider plant.
Yes.
Do you remember how popular spider and ferns? That really tiny fern. I don't know what it's called.
Maidenhair fern.
Yes, there you go.
Oh.
They're just back, and I don't know. You look at them differently a little bit.
Well, I always say I've never met a hydrangea or a fern I didn't love. And the only thing, let me tell you about those maidenhair ferns. So it's
like when someone gives you an orchid, sometimes if someone will give me an orchid, it's pleasure and pain, because I know that the flowers will fall, and I'm like, now what? That panic, that absolute panic.
Well, with the maidenhair fern, I've had summer flings that have lasted longer than a maidenhair fern. I'm just telling you. And I keep on going back. I see them and I go, oh,
yes,
maybe this time. Forever a romantic. Maybe this time it's going to work.
No, or I'll bring them to a photo shoot because they look fantastic in a shot. And someone after the shoot will say, "Oh, can I have it?" I'm like, "Go ahead."
Just do it.
It's like, if you don't live in the rainforest, good luck. It's so true. It's that one plant. So when we were friends early in the 90s, and then I got a job at Martha Stewart, and I wanted to pitch because we would come out to your house in Bucks County, and always for the Kentucky Derby. You always had a Kentucky Derby party, and you have this amazing garden shed. And I remember taking a picture of it, and I remember presenting it to the other editors, and I took these sort of casual shots. I sort of introduced who you were, and it was really instant. They were like, "Yeah, do an entertaining story there." And we did this entertaining story, and your whole family was there. I finally got to meet Mama, your mom, and your siblings, and it was really one of my favorite stories, because I think I always say when you work with friends, it's magic, when you're shooting with them. And your garden looked amazing. It was in the height of the best it's really, really, really looked. And it was such a successful story. The same photographer who shot that story shot your book, which was Helen Norman.
So I would do these stories for different, for the magazine, like garden designer, whomever, I would do these stories. And I met Helen, and I just, we connected really well, and we decided to do a book. So like for Meredith Corporation, I would do about 10 stories a year for them, come up with ideas. And then, in the beginning, they would send the editor out and do it. And then after that, they realized, wait, they're a little small. They weren't like the big Martha Stewart story. It was, but these small stories, it was just me and her. I could cook if I needed food on the table. I could style it. I could do it, and it'd be so easy for them. And it was trying to get across one idea. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't like a huge story. It's like a 3-page story.
Like making terrariums, I remember. It was very, very distinct. Yeah.
And we just started. So when I would get all these projects, and I would say, well, make sure Helen gets this job, because that way we could be together. Well, we just worked well together. So we would just shoot. We'd stay an extra day if it was at her house down in Maryland or wherever, we'd just spend an extra day and we would shoot the book. And I laid out the idea of how to do it, and we just shot it. It was a very beautiful book.
And it was just the two of you.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Everything from starting, everything.
So then after, you did this book, you have a successful career in New York City, you have this house in Bucks County, you're rolling along, and then Kentucky was calling. Talk about that a little bit.
I'm a mama's boy, and I'm proud of it. I would talk to her every day. I'm the youngest of 6. She was, Daddy was 50 when I was born. So, I was just hers. We have a connection. We have this unbelievable connection. Both of them helped me. They taught me how to do things, which made life so much easier, with manners and, a sense of pride and just being an honest person. I would come home all the time. And then I would come home in the winter, because what am I going to do in New York City in the winter? And I would spend the winters down here. So I always would come home. In 2010, we had the World Equestrian Games. And it was the first time this was ever in North America. So it was the most transportation of horses in the history of mankind since World War II.
And it was an exhibition?
Yes.
Sort of a...
So it's all the best saddle bred, the best standard bred, the best dressage, anything to do with a horse. All the best in the world came to Kentucky for the first time, and it first came to North America, and it happened to be in Lexington at the Kentucky Horse Park. So the Kentucky Tourism hired me to do a setup for their booth. It was all on a parking lot. So you know what I'm saying? So you're trying to create something. Then the sponsor of the show, which was called Alltech, this is a multi-million-dollar situation, having to get ready for all these people. And so I did Alltech experience, and it was huge. But you're creating. We built this pavilion. It was an old barn out of reclaimed barnwood with my good friend George Gatewood, who does reclaimed wood. And we turned it into where you could experience. You could walk through. It was something, but it made me realize, because I told my clients, I said, now I'm going to be down here for 3 weeks straight, and I said so this is where I'm going to be. And then I realized, wait, you know what? This could work. I could really move home and then still continue in New York.
Still continue in New York?
Because I could go back. I could set it up. I'd be there once every 3 weeks or something, once a month, and spend a week.
During like a growing season, you could go back, right?
Well, you have to come in, in the falls when everybody's entertaining. Everybody's going to the Hamptons in the summer. So I would just make it, but that's a once a month thing. But I realized it would work. And then I just, all of a sudden I started doing all these horse farms, and if you know how to garden, you can adapt and you can make it. I was known as the rooftop garden. So there were a lot of rooftops here in Louisville and Lexington they were building, but then doing residential. So then I realized, wait, I can drive up in my truck with my 2 girls, my girl reels, I call them, my dogs.
What are their names right now?
Now it's Gertrude and baby Magnolia.
And, baby Mags.
Yeah, but I've had, Kate and Lily and Daisy and Bertha, but just my loves of my life. But I could come up to a horse farm, and it's not all the stress of parking, double parking, getting the big tickets, having to go take everything upstairs. It was a lot to get up there. It was
doormen and traffic,
and dealing with the people and getting through all of their rules and regulations. And I try to do
up boards and
it's funny because sometimes when people would buy the penthouse, they would I always called it, they had this thing called penthouse envy, the rest of the building, and they would make it difficult for the person on top,
Because they were jealous.
Yeah, penthouse envy.
Of that terrace.
And so finally they would, I'd have to sometimes go in front of the board. And so, I learned how to do. Well, first of all, I would just tell them how we were going to do it. But then I learned how to do it. I'd say, and then right here is we're putting the hot tub. And they go, no, you're not, there's no, no water. I go, okay, then I can't do that. Well, then they forgot about the rest. They let me do
it. Yeah, that's actually smart. That's really smart. So when you went back to Kentucky, you went back to your family home. Then you were living at your family home.
Well, no, I met someone else after Willis. It's 12 and a half years we were together. And we broke up right in 1999. And we had a place in Atlanta. He kept it down there, and I kept the Bucks County farmhouse until 2015. This house, the house I've always wanted. Now, my senior year in college, I remember I worked for Miss Ann Evans, and it's another person that's my family. I would do anything in the world for this woman. I loved her. I still love her. But she was a caterer. She said, well, this is the address. You meet me here. I was her bartender. I loved to bartend because you get to talk to people. And I did it for extra money my senior year in college. And I remember seeing this it was like an overgrown, deserted mansion. You know what I mean? It's not that big, but it's kind of cool with columns and, 1851. I remember.
What was the name of it?
It's called Botherham, Botherum. And it was named after there were in the 1840s, there was a popular play. And there was two characters, and they were lawyers, and one was named Botherham, and the other was named Borum. So it was a play, Botherham and Borum, these lawyers. And this man
just slur it.
And the man that owned this house was a lawyer, and he was making he named it. He's making a joke, and he was the president of the Northern Bank of Kentucky. And a very close friend of Abraham Lincoln. And in fact, the closest neighbor here was Abraham Lincoln's wife. Their house was not too far away back in the day. But this was 35-acre farm originally when he bought it. And then Abraham Lincoln was in this home many times. And I've always loved Lincoln. Lincoln's my guy, and Teddy Roosevelt, those two, for some reason, I love them. So he helped bankroll Lincoln.
And this house, it stayed in their family for a certain number of years and then became available?
I'm the fifth owner here. So who I bartended for, I remember coming in there and I'm pushed through the gate, and you could finally see the house from the street. Before, you could just see maybe he was an amateur astronomer, the man that built this. So there's a big turret up on the top, and you could see that. I got in there, and I remember setting my bar up in this hallway, and I just remember this tiny hall, and I looked up, and Miss Ann came in. She said, well, what are you doing? She said, are you all ready for the guests? I said, of course. She said, well, what are you doing? I said, what kind of person would build this little hallway with these 14-foot octagonal ceilings out of plaster? I said, somebody I'd be friends with. Somebody who loved detail. Somebody who loved drama. And then the big drawing room, it's octagonal, and it's 14-foot ceilings. There's just nothing like it really in the. Whereas this man, who built it, after his wife died, he never married again, never had children. So I always called it a 1-bedroom ranch because it's one floor and it had 1 bedroom in it. This big house.
Wow.
But instead of doing 2 floors, he would take the ceilings. So there's 3 rooms that have these huge, big, dramatic ceilings.
I know, no matter how small a room is, if it has really high ceilings,
proportion,
it actually works. It really just work. It does work. So then you got this house, you renovated it. We did at Living, we did a story on it. It's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. Was it the labor of love that you thought it would be? And was there a ton of renovation on it?
Yeah, it needed a lot. They were, like, just to tell you, there were bars on the windows. I bought it from Dr. Cavendish, who bought it in 1980. And he had amazing taste. And I met him that one time when I bartended, and I never saw him again. But he had it when I bartended here. And then it secretly came up for sale. It never was on the market. And then my friend who lives on this street, Fantasia, her name is Fran Taylor, but I always have nicknames. Fantasia, she was the vice president of Keeneland for 20 years, but she called me up and says, "Johnny boy, the house you've always wanted is secretly on the market. Come." And
so it wasn't listed. It was
no. Okay. Everybody wanted to come see this house, but he was a hermit, and he was perfect for the name Botherham. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it had bars on the windows, and then he had moved to a farm outside of town, and so it was kind of deserted for about 15 years. So kids had thrown something through the window. So the raccoons had infested the basement. I had to get rid of 16 raccoons, and I know how many.
That's very Grey Gardens.
It was very. I wouldn't go downstairs in that basement unless I had my dog Lily, who was the love of my life, who would, she could take down a shark if a shark looked at me. You know what I mean? She's that kind of girl, the kind of girl I like. But it was like medallions from the ceiling were on the ground. We took 7,000 pounds of excess roof off the roof. That's the first thing I did, because when there was, over the years, when there was a leak, they just bring up 2x4s and patch, and build it up. So you had to pay for that poundage. That's why I knew how many pounds we had, because you had to pay for it in these big dumpsters. Yeah. And we put a copper roof back on, and then it started drying out, and then those amazing ceilings started cracking
because of the pressure,
finally dried out, and it was just cracking. So I had to have a plaster person here for almost 9 months to fix everything. Right. And then it ended up, I did it in 1 year and 6 days, and people would say, when we bought it, they would say, "Well, there's only 2 companies in town that do the historic homes. You're going to have to hire them. They're blah, blah, blah." I was like, well, I grew up with books, because that's what I grew up reading. We didn't have a TV. So I figured most everything out, other than this computer.
That's really true. I always think that when people say, "I don't cook," I'm like, "Can you read?" You could probably get through it. Yeah.
Well, I just did my research and took it back to what it was. I was just trying to see what was the real thing underneath it. Ended up winning the highest honor in the state, the big award for preservation through Kentucky Preservation, for this house. And it just, I used it for fundraisers for different groups, like the Bluegrass Trust for preservation, for the Humane Society, for the Garden Club of Kentucky. I just raised a lot of money because everybody wanted to come here and
to see it.
Yeah, and then I had 100 chairs. I have tables. I have plates. I have 100. I have 100 of everything. Linen napkins. I got it all.
So when you had this house, did you know what you wanted the garden to look like? It's absolutely beautiful, by the way.
I love
the pool area. I love it.
It's and it's even it's so much better now. It's so much better now because there was a formal garden that I found pictures of that was no longer there. It was just the centerpiece with an armillary. So I even found the bricks that were piled in the corner on the property and redid that and got an award for that, for kind of restoring that with preservation.
Did you have pictures of what it looked like before, or
of the formal garden?
Okay.
But nothing else. Not really. I mean, not really anything else. There's a walled garden here, which is actually my favorite. I love it. It's all white flowers, and it's just the most. It's my favorite garden. Then there's another gate down there that was the service entrance, which has been closed off. And once you close off a gate, you can't get that back here in town at a historic property. So I turned that into a woodland walk. So my dogs, they love to go there. They do their business there, they're nice little girls. And
I wish I had a wooden walk to do my business.
and then what came on this property was the bonus house. It was a 1980 garage built by Dr. Cavendish, 3-car garage.
Mm-hmm. In the same style
it kind of looked like a carriage house from the 1850s. So I turned that into, it's 3 floors. I lived in there I did it in 3 months, and we lived in there for a year while this is being redone. So because I'd have to meet my guys, my builders and electricians, everything, then go off to work to make money to pay for it. And so that's how we got it done. And I just got it done in record time, a year and 6 days.
Looking back from your Kentucky childhood to living in New York, doing terraces for famous people and others, to renovating a historic home, to working on, horse farms and distilleries. What do you think ties all of your work and your life together? Like, what's the common thing, would you say?
Good question. Now it's it's natural. It's nature. I don't kind of go in there to overbuild, which can happen with, it gets overbuilt. I'm the opposite of Las Vegas. I've never been there. It just,
me neither, actually.
I have no interest in going.
I don't really have an interest.
I'll go to a property and so going back to, like Castle and Key Distillery, they had just started. I was their first hire. And this lawyer here in town decided he didn't want to do that. So he bought this distillery. Of course, they spent $20 million but it's this famous distillery here. It's one of the top on the Bourbon Trail tourism, which is, hundreds of thousands of people go through this each year because they learn how to do bourbon tourism. And so I've done Maker's Mark, which is they were the first to do bourbon tourism, his grandmother, and Rob Samuels is now the grandson who's in charge of it. So I did Maker's Mark and Castle and Key. And it's as much a garden experience as it is a booze experience. You know what I'm saying? It's multi-layered. And so, but doing both these places, that's what goes, to answer your question, I looked at each one and I had to give homage to what was already there with Makers. When I started 13 years ago, they already had 130,000 visitors a year. I just made more of what they did. I used the colors of their bottle. I used flowers in that red, that wax. I took the label is wheat colored. I did flowers of that color. Very simple things, but it just made a difference. And then with Castle and Key, it was this crumbling castle built in 1887 as a distillery. And instead of making it look like Disney World, we just repaired the sunken garden to where you can have a pond and a fish. And I look at the property first. Mm-hmm. You see what I'm saying? That's what I'm trying to say. I don't come in with this idea. I just look at the property. The buildings tell me how to build the garden. So that's what I did with New York. So if you could, anything that would make, that would say, well, how are your gardens compared to? Well, I just look at the building and I work off. And if the building's beautiful and crumbly and romantic, that's what the gardens are like. You know what I mean? So that would be
really nice. Yeah. Jon, we'd like to ask this question of our guests, and it's, what's the best advice that you've ever received? And what advice would you give to someone getting into what you do?
I think the best advice that I could give anyone going into the business, and I do this a lot. A lot of people contact me and they look up to me, and with what I've been able to do, and I give advice freely, and I really try to help people. I give, if there's somebody that's getting in business and it's something that I can't do, I give them this person's name or several people's name. So I really help a lot of people, and that gives me a lot of great joy. But the main thing is, like with success in anything, listening. And, I go to a client and I try to pull out everything I can, to find out how are you using this? What are you thinking? What are you thinking? So they may have an idea, and then I can take that idea and move on. But listening to people, watching even what their colors are. You can go in somebody's house and you can kind of tell what kind of colors people love, because it makes it different. All my gardens are color coded. You know what I'm saying? I have a white garden. I have a yellow. People love that. It just makes it, if it's all the same and everything, you put every color in there and everything's the same, then you might as well not even go see the different rooms, and creating these rooms. But listening to people and trying to figure out what makes them happy, but also listening to the land. And you see, like, this is a wet area. Instead of trying to fix that, and you can't a lot of times, because in Kentucky, it's all these underground springs that just come up in your yard. You can be in town and they're going to be a big wet spot. And when it rains, you can actually see water gushing out of there. But instead of trying to fight it, you just work with Mother Nature and you put in water tolerant plants that work there. And if this is a dry area, so you're listening to the land, the light, and that's the secret, is figuring out what works. Because I'll try something twice and I'll replace it twice, but I won't do it a third time.
That's a good rule. That's actually a really good rule.
It's, because you can't fight it. It's Mother Nature's going to win. Thank goodness.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because she's
smarter
than all of us.
Maybe that's the title of this episode. Jon, this has been one of my favorite interviews that we've done on the podcast. I think that it's a very personal one as well, because I've known you for so long, and I wanted to thank you and wish you all the best in all your endeavors, and someday we'll make it down there to Kentucky to visit you. Our producer is Chris Kangas. Our theme music was composed by Pierce McIntyre, and a special thanks to all the amazing people at East 10th House Studio.